too.
Hello, everybody who's already jumped on the call. I know we have a lot of people who are going to be filtering in, but we're going to have a great webinar today. It's going to be hosted by the Rehabbers Playbook, and we're going to be talking about what I like to say, the real business of flipping houses. And to me, there's truly nobody better to talk about this with than Jim Ingersoll. I'll let him in his introduction tell you how many houses he has flipped. But in addition to that, to me personally, he's been an amazing mentor for my business. I'm lucky enough to call him a good friend of mine. He's an author. He's the host of Deal Maker, which is my favorite real estate event every single year. It was actually my first real estate event as well. And he is also the founder of Inner Circle. I mean, this introduction can just keep going, right? So Jim does not like taking compliments, but today we're going to
talking about myself
to take compliments.
No. Thank you.
But I completely understand. I'm the same way. But yeah, founder of Inner Circle, which is something I consider one of the best decisions I made for my business, is joining that group. So we'll talk about that a little bit today too. But I mean, he's a seasoned and experienced investor. He does flips. A big cornerstone to his business is his rental portfolio and doing the BRRRR strategy. He does commercial, he does new construction. So he does it all. And that's my introduction. I'll stop. Jim, why don't you kind of give us an introduction for yourself? I had to do that so you didn't have to brag for yourself.
No. Thank you. No, here's my introduction. I'm a friend of Brandon's. And let's say go Brandon, and that's all we need.
That's right.
Good enough.
I don't know if Greg's on the call. I don't know if maybe I shouldn't put this, but Greg gave me this.
I remember.
Yeah, I love it. It's just cheering me on, guys. Don't read too much into it. He's just cheering on Brandon. So yeah, Jim, I guess that's all the introduction you need after everything I just said.
I am so sorry. Like my lighting here, I'm in Deltaville at our property on the water here, and the lighting, I don't know, it's really screwy today. So really sorry. I keep trying to turn this away from my windows, but sorry about that, guys. It's an honor to be here with you, Brandon. I am cheering for you every day, as you know, and it's one of my favorite things I get to do. So it's an honor to be here. Yes, I flipped way too many houses. Hundreds. I don't know how many. I started off wholesaling, and I wholesaled 100 houses a year for a couple of years in a row, and I thought that was too much work. Like several years later, I decided I'm going to start flipping one house a week, and I did that for a while, and I came to the same conclusion. It's just way too much work. All those houses I've sold over all these years, say several hundred, do me no good today. So my very favorite is just to buy and hold, but you've got to have some active income, and flipping is a great way to create some active income.
That's a perfect transition into kind of where I wanted to start with this conversation, which is, when people get into real estate, there's many different avenues. But when you talk about people getting into real estate, they say, well, I'm building wealth. And I feel like it's important to be careful about that, because sometimes you're really not building wealth, for example, in things like flipping and wholesaling, but you're building active income, right? So can you kind of tell us your thoughts on where that plays a part in a real estate investor's career, in their growth, and how they can eventually get to building wealth?
Well, everybody needs money to live on.
That's right.
So it's important that you have some active income. My daughter Carissa, but when I went full time, she was in middle school. So, at that point in my life, like I had to replace my corporate income, and I did it with wholesaling. But flipping is good too. And then what you can do is you can take your excess income. It's pretty easy to make money doing all this, and then roll that into your rentals if you want. For a long time, it was easy to buy rentals really with very little money out of your own pocket. But newsflash, rates have more than doubled in the last 2 years. So it's gotten a lot more challenging to do BRRRR as well.
That's right. Yeah. And now it was just 2 days ago or yesterday, it went up over 8% for the first time since 2000. It's a big deal.
Isn't it unreal?
Yeah, and for entrepreneurs, like a lot of people on this call, it's tough, you know, you're constantly adjusting and changing, and you're trying to also stay on a straight path as much as you can. But I know that I've run into the struggle where every few months I'm kind of shifting things, and it's
Mhm.
tough to really build momentum when you're doing that, right?
Well, that's true. And I mean, part of that is focus too. I mean, for even today, Cheryl will tell you, like, I can really go off focus myself.
Yeah.
So it's easy to do. As an entrepreneur, we see opportunity everywhere. I could fix everyone else's business too.
Yeah, that's right.
Everyone who's got a screwed up business, I have some remedies, but you know, I can't. I got to stay focused on our own stuff ultimately.
I'm the same way. I'm sure I drive people crazy with all the
Yes.
different ideas. And that's why some people have literally people within their business. I've been looking for this person for a while. Maybe it's my family, but somebody within their business that's like, no, stay away from the shiny object. Let's focus on the goal and stay on the straight. And it's difficult, especially when you're an entrepreneur. You start getting that first taste of
Yes.
success, and you're like, okay, now I have a little bit more resources and time and people and a network to start chasing this avenue. And then
Right.
you forget about everything that got you there.
Right. Yeah, that is
So
me. For me, that is Cheryl. So, and if it doesn't fall into a category of what we call peace and freedom, we're just trying to avoid it. But there's a lot of opportunities, but they can be a lot of work. And last thing I want to do is create a lot of work for myself right now.
that's a gem right there. Is I saw was that today you posted that peace and freedom?
Yes,
Yeah, it
I got to
immediately,
keep reminding myself.
yeah, it immediately locked in my brain. I was like, that's something that I need to take with. And honestly, naturally, it's something that I have, but I never heard that term until I saw that
Yep.
post, and I think it's amazing.
That's our goal. And so that's the filter it's got to go through with my wife when I'm looking at commercial assets mostly these days.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't go through that filter, she pushes back pretty hard. It doesn't matter if it's got seller financing, cash flows, has some equity. If it doesn't have a component of peace and freedom, she doesn't want to do it right now.
That's huge. And the more successful you get, or the more opportunities that gravitate towards you,
True.
which is the more you have to filter out, which I'm going through decisions right now that I'm praying on. I'm trying to figure
Good.
out if it's in peace and freedom, and it's tough, you know, you have to play that balance. So let's talk about getting there. We talked
All
about
right.
wholesaling and flipping, and how that's active income. It's not going to build your wealth, but active income you can funnel into your passive investments, and then you can start building wealth.
Right
So
on.
I think it's pretty known that the two best ways of making active income, or let's say the two most common, are wholesaling and flipping. And today, us talking about flipping, I'd like to talk about, you know, is this business for everybody? You know, is this something that everybody should go for with flipping, or should they go to wholesaling? What do you think is really um the factors that people should be thinking about to determine which avenue is best for them between wholesaling and flipping?
Well, let's start with timelines real quick because I think wholesalers think in terms of like days and weeks. Like they want these really quick paydays with assignment fees, right?
Mhm.
Whereas a flipper, it's going to take longer. Even if you're a speed rehabber, like I've always been, it's going to be like an average of 4 months. And for a lot of people, it could be 6 to 9 months before you get that first payday. That's a long time. And then us landlords, we think in terms of years and decades and really generations. So there's your timeline. If you need to replace your active income pretty quickly, like I did when I left corporate America, then wholesaling can work. But that is a hard marketing business now as well. So there's some challenges to wholesaling. It costs a lot of money to really compete. Um, I today, Brandon, when I got my mail here, I had 4 postcards in my mailbox for the same house in Norfolk.
No.
So there's a lot of people buying, and I'm not selling, but there's a lot of people buying for the same properties right now is my point. And then, flipping is great. but you just got to have a little time. You got to get your finances right. You got to have a contracting team to pull it all off. And the margins on flipping right now, I think, are tightening a little bit as well.
They are. Yeah, definitely. And I think both run into the same issues I see nowadays, which is not many people are selling their existing. You know, it's with the high interest rates, people holding on to their existing interest rates. You know, you got distressed property in all markets, but right now it seems like even distressed property is hard to find. So you have a bunch of people marketing, nobody really selling, and that's affecting both of those businesses.
I do, but I do think that it's going to transition here soon.
I think so too. Yeah.
Because I'm seeing in our marketplace a lot of price reductions right now in Richmond.
Yeah.
And in other markets as well, in Florida and other places I've been investing in. So that's to me like the leading edge of transition. Now, I don't know how long it'll be, because I'll tell you, like last winter, I picked up a lot of houses as we transitioned into the holidays. And then by February, it was hard to get them again.
That's right.
So I don't know how long it'll be, but I could just sort of see it coming.
I've seen that too. I think it was 2 months ago. I was watching the trends, and demand was actually for the first time like softening, and the houses were sitting, and the inventory that was on the market wasn't really going up. It might have been ticking up a little bit if I remember correctly, but it was ticking up because houses were sitting on the market, not because more people were selling houses. So I see that transition too. And I do believe that student loan payments kicking back in is going to be a big deal. I know that's not directly related to real estate, but it's economic related, and all of that funnels into real estate at some point, right? Especially as that younger generation is needing to buy houses, interest rates are rising. It's a tough market for them. So
it is.
It'll be interesting how that affects things too.
Yep. No, I agree with all of that. But flipping is really good. It's transactional. But just realize, like right now, I think margins have tightened a little bit.
Yeah.
Because the past, say, 4 years or whatever it's been, this run up, you could sort of pick up your ARV when you buy it. You might be able to buy it like at 85% instead of 70 or 75%, and know that the market's going to bail you out.
Yeah.
Because what happens? You put it on the market and it sells way over list price.
Right.
We've had them go up like over 70,000 over list price.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's going to happen if you list today.
No.
You might have a price cut or an offer come in with closing cost assistance, and buyers are getting more aggressive on their inspections again. So all of that, I think, is going to tighten that down. So my word to flippers is make sure that you're buying at the right price. I don't think you can buy at what you did a year ago.
Yeah. And I think sellers, distressed sellers, wholesalers, which obviously still starts with a distressed seller, they need to still transition into understanding what that house really costs, because of the past 2 years of rapid real estate inflation across the board, high demand, low inventory, all that shifting. So it is an interesting time. The bullish part of house flipping I like, or the key part of it that I think is something that's still very attractive, is if you're in a market with low inventory, if you can bring good inventory to the market, it might not get the above asking that we used to. You might not be able to list it as high as you used to, but you should be able to find a buyer, and you're still helping that market be balanced. And, we just sold a house recently, and 2 new construction houses. They're the same exact house. Typically, when you sell one 6 months later, that's the exact same, or 8 months, you might be able to go up $5,000, $10,000, something like that. Same exact price, but it sold in a weekend. And the feeling you got is that these buyers don't have anything else to buy. And
no inventory, right?
That's right. Yeah.
So here's where I think flipping is a risk. Paying too much because you're using comps from a year ago instead of 3 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
Going too deep in your renovation with finishes that you don't need to do. Budgeting, you're so good at teaching, like gifted at teaching budgeting and scope of work, right? We talked about that in Inner Circle last week.
Mhm.
So if you do too much, or if you don't really take the time to plan your budget, and then say you go 10%, say you pay 85% of the ARV, and then you go 10% over on your budget, and instead of 5 months, it takes you 8 months to get through it because the city is giving you a hard time on permits. All of a sudden, you think, you're all excited when you buy the house, you might make 40 grand. You might be a break even with that scenario I just gave you.
That's right. Yeah. Now, I think that's a great topic to kind of start with too, because we're going to get into the nitty gritty of flipping houses and really the business. But I like starting with, is this business for everybody? And
Oh,
what role does
that's
this
a good
business
question.
play? And then I also like talking about what you just brought up, which is how do people fail and succeed in this business? Because just as anything you try to do in this world, you're going to have people trying to talk you out of it. And flipping houses, I remember when I wanted to get into it, my family was like, no, 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 you're going to lose all your money. Why would you do this? And that's something you get from a lot of people because they might know a flipper who went out of business, or they might see somebody in the paper who went out of business and look at it be which we all know happens. So it might be something that seems risky from the outside looking in. What do you find? And I think you kind of touched on it, but let's talk about successful flippers. What do you
Okay.
see that similarities amongst people that you've seen be successful, not just for a couple years, but for a long period of time, a lot like yourself?
Well, I think, it's okay to sort of jump in and then sort of struggle on your first couple.
Hmm.
But, back to all these people that get in our mind, I think the mindset's really important that if you're really determined, then you can't let somebody steal your dreams.
Yeah.
Like you've got to believe in yourself, and you've got to build some momentum with some small wins and take the chance and make an offer and build the team. Long term, I think the team is really important. Like we do contracting in the rehab side, like without thinking about it now, because we've done so many. You know what I mean? Our contractors and the culture that we've built is they've got my back. And I'm not saying I don't swap people out. I've had 3 really hard conversations with contractors this week, but
Really?
they're not like my contractors that I've had for a long time. They're
Mhm.
doing other stuff. They're doing other things.
Right.
So, you have to swap people out sometimes, but if you can sort of get a core and then teach them what you're doing and how they can, keep working with you for many years, that's part of the win to me.
I couldn't agree more. I would say absolutely. And we talked about it on our last webinar when we talked about hiring contractors. I had Ron Biggs on,
Oh,
Trevor, Tim. It was a great call. And I I started off the whole call by saying, when you look at your successful flippers, builders, developers in your area, do you there's one thing you know for sure is their contracting team is good. They're probably an A+ team, and
yep.
they're probably, maybe they lose a few people, maybe they grow and they change people out, just like what you said, but they take care of them, and it's a team culture that is everybody looking out for each other, everybody trying to perform at the highest level. And once you have that too, what's great is you don't want to get out of the business, right? Because you've already built that. It took so
No,
much
you
time to
don't.
build it, and you just want to keep them busy. You want to keep their families fed. They want to keep your
Right.
family fed. It's fantastic.
Yeah, definitely want to keep our core contractors busy. And personally, I don't want to keep flipping this many houses, so I'm kind of transitioning to my kids a little bit,
Sure.
and they're starting to use the same contractors. And I talked to some of them, and they have their kids working too. My contractors do. They have sons that are 20 years old working on our houses with them. They've trained, and I'm like, isn't it cool that like someday you and I aren't going to be working, but both our kids will probably still be working together 15 years from now.
That's pretty cool. That's really cool.
So that's kind of the approach, is really long-term thinking
Absolutely.
is really
Yeah.
important, and building a team that understands your system. Our guys understand our system. So, I mean, they know it as well as I do.
It's funny when you keep saying team, because every time I talk about this topic in my group or when we do stuff like this, I
Yep,
don't say really hiring contractors. I say
there
building
you
your
go.
construction team,
So
because it is a
important.
team. Yeah. And just as much as you need to build a team to do anything in business or sports or extracurricular, whatever it is, you're trying to get surrounded by good people with the right mentality and help form that
So
culture.
it's so important, Brandon, like the culture, I'm not kidding, like in the leadership, you got to have some leadership and communication as a rehabber. It's so important. And I'll give you an example. Like I'm in Deltaville and our guys have been here doing some work for us in between a couple jobs. And so Sean and I just came in and she's like, how about I go pick up chicken for the guys that are working? Because they're here, they don't have lunch. And so that's what she's doing right now. She's gone to get them some fried chicken. We did that last week as well. So, just do something different for your guys. Bring them donuts, grab them Chick-fil-A, whatever. Show that you appreciate them. Grab them a pizza, whatever. Just be a little different and let them know that it's more than just a contractor rehabber relationship.
Absolutely. And this all stemmed off of us talking about what makes flippers successful or
Yes.
fail. And I was going to talk about next was building our construction team. And we're already hitting all the main points. It's such a huge part of this business. Anybody who's new or experienced, you can't overlook this part of the business. I put it number one. It's a people
Me
business.
too.
All of this is a people business, and I put it as number one. And when you talk to people like Jim, when you talk to people like we've had on the call before, we've had Lisa on, we've had Daniel on, like I said, Trevor, Ron, they talk about their relationship differently than I think new flippers think of how that relationship is supposed to go. I think people think the relationship is like this, just
Right.
button heads and negotiating, getting better prices, getting better timelines. No, the negotiation is you're on the same road, or sorry, the relationship is you're on the same road, going towards the same goal. Everybody's profitable, everybody's successful. And at the end of the road, you cross the finish line and you all hang out and enjoy life together. Right. So I've been to barbecues with my guys, I've
Love
met
that.
their kids. They've met my family. They've been to my house.
Same here.
That's the type of relationship that successful flippers have in comparison to people who are constantly fighting with their crews, not having the same crew over and over. That's not always possible. We always like to say it, you got to kiss a lot of frogs to find the right team. But once you find the right team, you hold them tight and you take care of them.
That's
Now,
right. When I talk about like I've had like these firm conversations, this isn't with like my team I've been doing for a long time.
right,
This is like contracting projects that may not even be in Virginia or a different type of project than I would normally do.
right,
And I'm thinking back, like some of the more difficult contracting projects I've done, Brandon, aren't rehabbing. They're like I put a pier at my house in the water here. That was a challenge with the contractor there for a while. And then we put a swimming pool in at the house I lived in. I had a really difficult time with the contractor. So these are like one-offs once in a while.
yep. Do you believe hire fast, fire faster?
Yes.
Yeah, same.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I did that
I
in corporate America too.
I tell people you would be surprised by two things: how lenient I am with my core crew,
There you go.
and how strict and how fast I am to fire somebody that I've never worked with before who's not
Right.
doing their job. I've pulled people off of jobs. I'm like, I don't care. I'll pay you for
Right.
what you've done. I might have to pay a little bit extra, but I
Right.
want a better
Yeah.
relationship. I want a better product.
There you
And
go.
yeah, you're all over it. This is the key. And again, I think this is number one. Anybody who's new, like this is where you really have to focus your time is building crews, building your team, and building those relationships. I actually have a question that just popped in my head. It's kind of
Okay.
random, hypothetical. If your core team came up to you, I guess this is a two-part question. Do they
Okay.
ever give you prices that you look at and you're like, I don't really like that price? And if they do, how does that conversation go with your core crew?
I don't do pricing anymore, Brandon, so I'm a little different. I know like in my heart, exactly close where pricing is going to be.
Yeah. So
So
you
they
kind of
don't pre-bid. I don't pre-bid anymore. I know where
really,
it's be using my contractors. Yeah.
that's the best thing you can have. I have it with some of my core guys too. Some of them, I understand this process. They want to, and I actually like that too. They want to give that price up front, even if I'm like, just start the
Right.
job. But most of the time they'll start the job, and while they're doing the job, they'll just send me a price. And I'm like, okay, you're good. You know, rarely negotiate. Every now and then I'll say, hey, look, this is a little bit more than I budgeted. Let me help you out here and do this for you so you can maybe get the price down, something like that. But that's as far as
Yeah.
it ever goes.
And, when you're brand new, I think it's really important that you know your pricing up front.
Yeah. Yes.
But
Yeah.
I mean, I've done this a lot, but I'm also doing it in 2 states. So,
Mhm.
like in Florida, I've got different people than I do in Virginia.
Right.
And I can tell you, we're rehabbing an apartment in Florida right now with somebody I've worked with a number of times, quite a few times over the last 2 years. And I didn't get pricing up front. And I gave him a lot of latitude on what to do. And I think he over rehabbed my apartment a little, but it looks really good. And I'm okay with it. It's going to
Good.
rent easy for a little bit more than I would normally.
Yeah, I think that as investors, we have to be really, really focused on money, of course, but there are the battles that you have to choose. And I think keeping a relationship is something that you need to weigh into your decisions. If it's a good relationship, of course. All right, let's
I'll say,
transition to a different part of the business.
okay.
Um, Funding the flip, financing
Oh,
the flip.
one of my favorites.
Yes, one of your favorites.
All right.
Part of the introduction and background I didn't give for Jim is he also does some lending. Um, and I know that you also are open to, or at least you do some JV deals. Maybe it's with people you know well. But let's talk about funding deals. Maybe just give like an overarching idea to new investors, how they should start thinking about funding their flip, where they should be looking, and
Okay.
what kind of money they should be looking for.
I mean, there's basically 3 ways to fund your flips. You could pay cash. Maybe you've got cash. Maybe you've got a line of credit. Most people do not, especially when you're starting off, right?
Yeah.
And it kind of depends on your experience and where you're at. I worked with both my girls started flipping houses when they were freshmen in college during the
Mm.
summer. So their ability to do funding is a little different than most of ours, right?
Right.
So you can either pay cash, use a line of credit, or you could get a hard money loan, and you're gonna pay a good amount of points and interest, but it gets you into the game. There are some private money lenders that'll do joint ventures. John Scholler out of West Virginia is one of them, but then you could also do debt financing with a private money lender. I've been doing that for investors lately myself, and you'll probably pay 10% and 2 points, something like that. So there's a couple different ways to do it.
Can you explain to people very, overarching explanation
Yes,
of the difference between hard money, private money,
sure.
and then maybe touch on debt financing as well?
Okay. Now, all of it's debt finance. It's like getting a loan
Yeah.
at the bank. When you go to get your car, you're going to be given an interest rate and your monthly payment. But on these short-term loans, again, this is short-term, probably a 6 to 12 month loan.
Mm-hmm.
And that gives you time to get through your project and get it sold. You're going to typically pay 10% interest only, and then a couple of points. So let's talk about what that is, because there's a lot of shysters out there, Brandon.
Yes.
For instance, I know people that have taken loans, brand new investors, that I ask them how did you get your funding? What is the rate? And they tell me 10%. And I said, oh, how much is that? And they say, oh no, it's 10% of the loan amount. And I'm like, what are you saying? Yeah, I borrowed 250,000 and I'm going to pay the lender a $25,000 fee. I'm not kidding, Brandon. This
Fee?
is happening. Okay.
Wow.
Interest, 25 grand. Okay,
Wow.
because they say 10%, they assume they mean like 10% interest only, monthly payments.
Yeah.
But it isn't. It's 10% of the loan amount.
Wow.
So I
In
just use that as a point of
example.
like,
Yeah.
be aware of your financing. David Phelps always he's a good friend of mine, used to always say, Jim, before people order the dumpster, they should learn to use their financial calculator.
Yes.
It's so true, right?
You know
Because
what
we're
was
so
bad, Jim?
excited, we're gonna get that dumpster and we're gonna demo day. But you really got to understand your financing.
You know what's bad? I never had a financial calculator on my phone until Dealmaker 2020.
Woo
Yeah,
woo!
and then it's like literally homepage of my phone. I'm
I like it.
constantly looking up different rates and all that stuff
Love
and
it.
how it affects. But it's one of the most important tools. So if you get anything out of this call, that's something that it took me 4 years to even put that on my phone.
Love
And it
it.
changed everything.
Well, I see Corey's on. He's been using his a lot. I know that. All right. So mostly, let's just say you're going to borrow $100,000 on a cheap flip in Petersburg, Virginia. Okay. There's nowhere else you can get a flip for all in at 100, right? Well, maybe Jackson, Mississippi, Cleveland, Ohio. I mean, there's a few, Gary, Indiana. All right. So that would be, here's your financing, 10 and 2. You hear 10 and 2. What that means is you're going to pay 10% interest only monthly payments and 2 points. How much is that really? On $100,000, unfortunately, Brandon, I've got this memorized. $100,000, that's $833.33 a month. Okay, so that's your monthly payment. You're going to have to pay your private money lender. This is private money. This isn't hard money. Hard money is
Interest
even a little more. So you
interest
got
only, right?
33 a month to make payment on, and then 2 points. The 2 points are either paid at closing on the front end or at the back end. I've done it both ways as a lender. I think I've done it both ways as a borrower. But and that means you're going to pay 2 points, and 1 point is 1% of your loan amount. So 2 points on 100,000 is $2,000. So if that loan goes 6 months, that would be $5,000, and 2 points is 7. Okay, $7,000 out of your flip profit.
Yep.
Okay,
Perfect.
so it's important to understand your numbers. Now, if you're, doing different rate and points, you'd have to figure that out.
Yes. Yeah.
If you pay cash, then or something lower than that, then you'll be that little bit ahead. It'll help your margins. Helps your margins a little too if you're a realtor, because you don't have to pay the extra 3% of commission.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. That was a great explanation, like a simple way. I'm glad you have it memorized too, or else we'd be sitting here on the calculator.
Yeah.
But that is perfect. I think just even going through the basics like that helps people out, because financing shouldn't be a speed bump really here. Do you agree with that? I think you can find financing and you can understand terms rather easily. If you're not finding financing, I hate to say it, but I would argue that you're not looking hard enough. You're not going to the right events.
It's not difficult to find
Yeah.
funding.
Yeah.
There are hard money lenders in every city in America, number one. And don't be afraid to use them. I think it's important to have a network of lenders.
Oh
both
yeah.
private money lenders and then also hard money lenders.
Yeah, and most of those lenders, I just got reached out to by somebody I really respected. He's a lender. I've never used him, but we sat down at coffee last week and he was just like, look, I know you have your guys, but just, let me know if I ever can help out. They understand too, they want to be in the mix of what you're doing just as much as you want to
Yes.
mix up maybe the people that you're working with too. It's good to have one or two people that you can go to, but I like the fact that if anything happens to those two people, those two lenders, I have people ready. Like I said, I never want lending to be an issue, and I don't think it should ever be an issue for anybody who's new or experienced.
Yeah, no, it's easy to get your funding. Here's the key to the funding, the deal. That's
Yes.
it.
It's hard.
That's it.
Yeah. Hard money. Yeah. They're lending on the deal.
It's asset-based lending.
Yeah. Yeah. So you find a good deal. Now, here's something that I'd love to talk to you about with financing. When do you find your financing? Before the flip? Because here's what I think a lot of people, I I think it's absolutely true that you have the right deal, the money's going to follow. I think that's 100% true. Not even 99%, 100%. But I actually just got reached out to by, who was it? Somebody recently who was like, we had to skip out on the deal because we got the deal. We tried to find the financing. That lender fell through. That lender fell through. We had to close in 3 weeks and it didn't work out. What do you think about that situation? And what would your advice be to people?
I mean, number one, I wonder about the deal.
True. That's actually a good
There's
point.
if 2 or 3 people are dropping out, it might be because the deal's too skinny.
It's a good point.
That's just my guess.
Mm-hmm.
And so back to your original question, I think it's good if you're on with us on this webinar right now and you've never flipped but you want to, why not reach out to a hard money lender in your local area and understand how they work. In fact, I would call 2 or 3 of them.
Yep.
Just get that part of it like straight, because if you know you've got the funding, you can negotiate with a great deal of confidence.
Yes.
And having that confidence is really important.
It's hugely important.
I used to do it, Brandon, even when I was wholesaling. I did these things called bus tours, and we'd put 50 to 100 people onto these giant charter buses. And I would wholesale like 6 or 8 houses on a Saturday. But I would have both the contractors on there and the hard money lenders came along because they picked up a lot of loans.
Mm-hmm.
And so like the investors could talk to them and they would be like, would you lend like 80 grand on this house, whatever it was? And everybody would be like, yeah, of course. That gives everyone a great deal of confidence they can get closed. So build that relationship early.
Yeah, whatever can bring you to the negotiating table with full confidence is, I mean, should never be overlooked. I remember, or I can think of specific scenarios where I didn't have confidence because of X, Y, or Z, and the difference of how that negotiation goes compared to when you have full confidence. Your money's together, you have your team, you've maybe done a deal like this in the past, whatever it may be. You've sold houses in this area, rented houses in this area. So in financing, how can you be 100% confident if you don't have the financing? It's very, very difficult.
You know, I think friends and family make good options as well.
Sure.
They really do.
Yeah. I did my first one in college, and my family did not have money, but there was, let's just say somebody ended up with some money from a lawsuit and we put that money to work. That's a true story. That's how I got into my first deal in college. And, you know, you got to get creative. That's a first deal. That is very common for a lot of people with their first deal. You talk to people who had to grind through their first deal. They're pulling money together. I don't really advise for this, but a lot, they're pulling cash out of credit cards and they're doing stuff like that. Again, I really don't advise for that, but I advise for getting creative in other ways to find money, because people, you know, have money, and a lot of people who have money actually are waiting for you to have a conversation with them.
Boy,
that's something that I don't think people recognize. Yeah.
You know, Connor Brown, I helped Connor flip his first house while he was at JMU in college, and he borrowed the money from his grandmother. So you can just tell him I shared that.
I'll make fun of him now. Believe it or not, I was at his house this morning. He just bought, I don't know if you saw, he just bought a house in Tuckahoe.
Nice.
Oh, it's gorgeous. But he's doing an addition, and
I know he is.
Yeah, just of course, right? So but he's in the Bahamas right now. Anyway.
Of course.
Next topic. Let's keep moving through.
All right.
This is something that I kind of threw into the mix last minute, but I find it very important for flippers. I think it's important for people to find a niche as a flipper. I think a lot of people who fail out of the business are the people who say, I want to speed flip like Jim, but also do full guts like Brandon, but also do new constructions like Daniel. And they're trying to do all these things and they can't specialize in one avenue. Can you tell us about what you've specialized in? Have you ever thrown other types of rehabs in the mix? Can you talk to that point anymore? Because to
I've
me,
done all of those
yeah,
and everything in between. But I think over time, like what I want to do and what I enjoy doing sort of has shifted a little bit. But I will say, like when you're beginning, I wouldn't recommend a gut level rehab.
sure, yeah,
It's a lot of risk and it takes a lot of time. It's
hmm,
difficult on the permits. It's a lot of challenging stuff there.
yeah,
People think everything looks easy on HGTV, right?
yes,
Chip and Joanna, make it look so fun, but those gut level rehabs are a lot of work. They
oh
take a
yeah,
lot of time. They cost more than people think.
oh yeah. And this is
Um,
just hit me in the head right now, but when you watch, I've watched every HGTV show for the most part. Maybe not the new ones. Eventually they started annoying me as naturally as it does for a flipper.
right.
But you also notice they don't do a lot of full gut rehabs.
No,
Like so in Richmond, we get those old homes, right? The early 1900s, maybe even late 1800s homes. Some of these ones in Texas, Southern California, Florida that you're seeing, they're not as old.
right.
They're one-story houses. All the drywall is already there. You're not like ripping it out. You might demo one room, you might do an addition, but
They
these
probably do
rehabs,
not have knobbed tube wiring, for instance.
exactly, exactly, right. They might have like the 50s and 60s weird stuff, but they don't have the stuff that you
Right.
literally can't use anymore. So it's that I don't know. That's just like an interesting thought when you think of HGTV. You don't
It
really
is.
see those real next level full rehabs as what we're talking about that you can see everywhere in this business. So it is to me, I think finding a niche is important for flippers because if you see one project over and over, guess what else you see over and over? Similar budgets, your
True.
contractors see similar scopes of work, you see similar buyers, you're confident in the sale in that neighborhood. That's huge. Again, negotiating table through the process, having that confidence that's actually going to sell. So I have seen people really get in trouble with taking on projects they can't do, they're not built to do, they're not used to doing. And I think that's a huge part of the success as a flipper.
Yeah, I think so too. And we've done new construction. I've done it in Florida. Um, and then, the cosmetic stuff is just so easy. It's so fast.
Yep.
It's like you don't lose any brain damage doing it.
I get jealous of
Got
speed
a
flipping.
house. You
Yeah,
could have some brain damage. You're going to spend a lot of time.
definitely. Yeah, and you could have I mean, when you get into stressful situations like that, guess what else it does? It stresses your team, your
Does
relationships from A to Z, whether that's contractors, partners, realtors, designers, all of it, right?
it's
By
all
the
very
way, I
true.
kind of want to take a step back for everybody. I was so excited to see Jim today that I didn't mention. Throw your questions in the chat for everybody. I see Caitlin, you had one, so hopefully you're still hanging out with us. We'll get to that question in 1 second, but everybody, the chat doesn't work. The Q&A works, so make sure you're aware of that. The chat, I think, is like supposed to be. It's just like a leftover icon from normal Zoom calls, but these are like Zoom webinars, so only the Q&A really works. We'd love to have everybody's questions. I think this is a great time for you to ask Jim questions. So wanted to make sure I throw that out there. Jim, let's move on to budgeting and knowing your costs. I titled this webinar Flipping Without the Fluff. And to kind of define that a little bit more, I'll give an example of myself. When I first started flipping, when I bought that house in college, I was a victim of Rich Dad Poor Dad. My friend put that in my hand and I just went crazy with it.
Awesome.
Went right back to Barnes and Noble and bought the first book on flipping because I knew I had to flip first. And I read this book and then we got the deal. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I don't know anything. All I know is how to run the numbers, right? I knew. And I would imagine that everybody new in the business can pretty easily understand this is what I'm going to want to sell it at. You have to run comps, of course, but this is my ARV. These are my budget costs. let's just say the overall equation, right? Not necessarily what those costs are, but we know what the equation is. And the reason I'm prefacing it with that is because there's more to that conversation, right? There's a little bit more than you need to know 1 + 1 = 2 minus 3, right? You need to know how to make a budget. You need to know what those financing costs are that we kind of touched on. We need to know what those holding costs are. Now, in one webinar, we can't talk about all of that. But if you could give people a little bit of advice on where to start with that so they can be a little bit more confident. And this is a very difficult question, I feel like, because I don't even know besides maybe self-plugging my group. But
Well, I
that's
mean, let's just start there because you guys have all made it easy because you can just go to Rehab Evaluator
mhm,
and just pull up the templates. That's a good starting point.
that's right.
Because when you walk into a house and you're not experienced, even if you're experienced, it's easy to miss stuff.
Oh yeah.
For instance, like I bought quite a few hoarder houses, you can't see anything.
Mm-mm.
There's just like a little pathway through, and the person sleeping in the bathtub, I'm not kidding, can't make
Yes.
this stuff up. You can't see it. You can't see the floor. I like the way that you teach, Brandon. I remember you telling me this when I saw you in person. You said you come in, you start with like the one corner, right? And then work all the way around, up
Yep.
and down.
Mhm.
Like you got to be methodical. But in like a hoarder house or a house that was in a fire or whatever, you might not be able to see all that stuff.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah, we have a very specific way of how we want our eyes to move through the property. But with hoarder houses, you're right. I mean, you can have a methodical way to go about it, but you're still not going to see everything. And even after you get everything out, until you get the plaster off the walls or the drywall, if you're full gutting, you
True.
still might not see everything until you get under the crawl space or in the attic. You still might not see everything. So
Mhm.
I think this kind of
Well,
leads
that
us.
goes to your contingency. You've got it, especially if you can't see, you've got to have strong contingency.
Great point. Great point. And I think kind of the point of where we talk about with Rehab Evaluator or being involved with groups, I think it has a lot to do with the people you surround yourself with. Imagine going into anything complicated in your life, any other venture, avenue, without having a support system, without having people who've done it before. This is really where they're going to be able to help you out. Hey, Jim, how much did you just spend on vinyl shaker siding? Right? You're doing it right now.
You and
You
I
can tell
compare
me.
costs a lot, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So
Way to
that's what we
go.
do in our group. That's what we do in your group, right? People are constantly asking questions, sharing what they've spent. Are they spending more than they used to? Did they find a deal somewhere? And that could be some of the biggest things that you can learn and have as a rehabber or flipper so that, you have people that you can always ask. When you go into this business, I'll tell you what, Jim, you're a huge part of me growing up in this business or maturing. I don't even know how to say it, but it took me a while to start networking. It took me a
Mm,
long time to start
me too.
networking. And as soon as I did, it changed everything. I joined Inner Circle. I did Deal Maker every year. Besides last year, I had something which really sucked. But we that changed everything. Now I know people that I can go to, and the culture you build with that group and the culture in the real estate investor community is nothing but support. You might have a few bad eggs in there, but I think all of this again just goes to making sure you're around the right people who can support you.
Yes, Brandon, you are so right. So when I bought my first investment property, I think Cheryl and I were like 25. When it was a duplex, I was living in Jamestown, New York, and it looked pretty good on paper. It was like $20,000 for a duplex. That's 10K a door, right?
Yeah.
But I went and got a regular mortgage, 20% down, and then all of a sudden the place was a train wreck.
Mm-hmm.
It needed so much work. There's a reason it's $20,000. And the tenants move out and the tenants don't pay. And, I went through all of those struggles, and I did that all solo while I was working as an engineer. And, we sold it and got out of it and broke even. But after that, Cheryl's like, I'm never doing this again. That cost me like 10 or 15 years
Yeah.
because I didn't come back to investing full time till I was like 40. So
Because of that deal.
yeah. So my
Wow.
only point with that is, um, don't let a failure steal your dreams. And in fact, your speed of recovery after a failure is critical to your long-term success.
Huge. I love that. That's you
I
see
would have
that
had
amongst,
financial freedom in my 30s if I didn't give up.
oh
And
man.
what's the difference? I'm happy anyways, but
Oh, of course. You've done pretty well for yourself, I'd say.
life is good. But then when I came back when I was 40 and I was leaving corporate America, and I had to do things a little bit differently. I first, sort of like you, Brandon, I got involved with a investing group online. It was called Sell Your House in 7 Days. And so I started to meet some people, and I saw like people were succeeding in doing this. And then they wanted to, there was a meetup. I got invited to go to Tampa, Florida a couple of times for like Jack Miller, John Shaw, Peter Fortunato, people that really had a big impact early. And frankly, like I told Cheryl, like, I want to go, but we don't really have the money to even like invest this to go. And she's like, I believe in you, let's go. And then like the light bulb goes off because you meet other people doing it that are sharing. And then all of a sudden you get a win, and then you get a little bit of momentum, and that just builds. And then all of a sudden everything's okay because you have a network. And that's why that networking is so important. Even if you're an introvert, you got to go. Even if you don't have the money, you got to go.
I think a big theme that we're going to find through this conversation is your network and the people around you.
It really is.
And
They didn't teach me that at school, did they? You?
no. Well, they
I
teach
didn't
you how
learn
to
about
be in the,
compound interest. I didn't learn like you're the average of the 5 people you're hanging out with. You know what
nope.
I would study your engineering book.
Yep.
I
Bury your
hated
head in a
reading after I
book.
got out of college because I thought all I could read is textbooks.
Yep. And there's no leadership skills, which what
None.
we're talking about, you want to be a successful flipper, you want to build the best team, you have to
Right.
be the best leader. I tell people my job is a leadership. That's basically all I do. You know, I put out a post one time. I try to do maybe not self-deprecating, but more like I want to give all the credit, right? So I put out a post one time that was showing off like a flip we just did. And I said something like, my team does everything. Who knows what I do? You know, I just point fingers.
Love it.
And so many people reach out. They're like, did you mean to say this? Are you okay? You know, they were worried about me. I was like, no, that's my team. They do basically all of it. I'm just leading, you know? So
Isn't that amazing?
yeah, so that's a great part.
Love it.
I want to get to some of these questions. We have
All right.
not forgotten
Let's
about
think.
you. So we'll start with Anonymous, which is a great first name. Anonymous attendee. That's my attempt at a joke. At the wholesale deal, all the wholesale deals in my area are sight unseen. How do I know the numbers will work if I can't get a contractor in to tell me how much it will cost? These deals fly off the shelves, and I just wonder if I'm being too cautious or other investors don't know what they're doing or have done it for a very long time. I think you might be onto it with the last sentence, but I'll let Jim answer this one.
You know, I think it's difficult to buy a house sight unseen. I have done it, but I don't recommend it, honestly. So that's kind of I'm thinking back through, there have been a number of them, Brandon. I bought them sight unseen. There was a rental in Petersburg that I bought sight unseen with a tenant in it that I never saw even when I went to sell it. Like I never went to the house. I never stepped inside the house. I don't really recommend that. There was a couple of really good duplexes on North Side recently that looked good from a wholesaler. They were pretty good price, but without being able to really see them and know what I've got to pull for permits and things, I just didn't feel comfortable doing it, so I didn't do it. You know
And
what
I think
mean?
and I think that's the best advice for it too, right? I
You
think
can
that
do a lot through pictures, but I had a dream this last month, Brandon. It's so funny. I don't know if it's because of coming up on Halloween, whatever, but I dreamed that I bought a house sight unseen, and I went to the house for the first time. I went in the backyard, and there was a cemetery back there.
oh my gosh.
And I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do now? So you can't only go so far with pictures, with Google Earth. you've got to at least either that or have good boots on the ground. That's how I've done it in Florida. Like I
Yeah,
have somebody I can trust.
especially for flipping. There's other like new construction, of course, it's land, right? You can
Yes.
kind of get a lot of stuff, but flipping, I think the best advice, and I give this advice too. And look, I've bought houses sight unseen, but I think the second half of what the question was perfect. Was um, maybe they've been experienced or they've been doing this for a long time. In our area, we have like north side, and they have just a bunch of four squares. You have four squares with stucco.
Right.
You have four squares with well, vinyl siding. Sometimes, you just have kind of a very basic. I know they probably have a half basement. I know they have a pretty tall attic. I know the basement's probably leaking. Like, I can probably get a good idea, because if you've seen our portfolio of sold flips, it's 75% north side four squares. And then the last 25% is some townhomes or townhome style. Sorry, I'm saying that wrong. Row house style in Churchill. But that's kind of what I get here. And that's why I've done all the full guts and I don't flip as fast as you, Jim. But I have those, like, that's something I'm aware of. I
I've
know the
done
budget's
plenty of
pretty
them.
well.
I know those houses really well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Jim does a lot of north side too.
I have.
And Jim does it everywhere. But that niche has allowed me to do more sight unseen. So that would be my only, extra piece to it. I think a lot of experienced people would advise you not to buy sight unseen and just try to find one that you can actually go walk. If people are picking them up super fast, they might, they're probably very experienced. They've probably seen that deal a lot, and they probably are very well aware. And there's no reason for you to put your money at risk for being less experienced in that neighborhood for that type of house. But I think
That's
overall,
good
me and
advice.
Jim agree that it's
I,
probably
during the downturn, I put a lot of offers in sight unseen off the MLS, and I would do my rehab budget through the pictures on the MLS,
pictures
expecting
help. Yeah,
expecting them just to counter, and then I would get in person.
it's
And
a good
that
move.
worked a lot. But those days, you could buy houses off the MLS, like going to Publix and buying a loaf of bread. It was that easy.
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
Not like that anymore.
There's also markets where I never think people should count on these types of markets, but like think of 2021 to 2022, where everything's going up. I know people who've never flipped before got into the real estate game at that point and just literally purchased a house, could have sold it without doing anything 6 months
Oh,
later,
that's
make like
true.
15 grand. It was
Right.
crazy. But that, I would hope that never happens again. Well, you say hope. Depends on how you take advantage,
So,
right? Yeah.
we've only, Brandon, so I've flipped hundreds of houses, but this year I've only flipped 3.
Yeah, we've slowed
So
down too. Yeah,
I'm
we
working
do
mostly with my kids, and so anyways, it's been a good year for flipping, but I'm personally not doing tons of them right now.
probably less headache too.
Peace and freedom, Brandon.
That's right. That's another theme. All right, Judy. Judy is a new TRP member. Great to have you on. Can you
Judy
explain a
is
strong
awesome. I know Judy.
contingency on a hoarder house? How
What I
would
meant was, yeah, Brandon, what I meant was the contingency on your budget.
yes.
So if you're new, then you may want to have like a 10%, whatever you think it'll be, add 10% on. So if you think it's 40,000, plan on 44. But if you do a hoarder house, you might want to have 20%. So if you think it'll be 50, then plan on 60 for stuff you can't see, like the floor that's separating from the baseboard because there's boxes there or whatever.
That's exactly the way I teach it. I actually have kind of a chart that I did with budgeting for contingency costs, because you don't always use the same amount. I think that sometimes you use more like 10%, like you said. Sometimes you use 20%, and it varies on the degree of difficulty of that rehab and the budget cost. So as that budget cost gets to 100,000, unfortunately, I would argue that you have to go up in your contingency costs as you're going up as well, because there's just more factors at play when you're doing $100,000 rehab versus like a 50,000. So, Judy, yeah, I would kind of use a scale between 10 to 20%, depending on the complexity of the job, depending on your confidence in budgeting and how big that job actually is. And with complexity and the size of the job, I'm actually referring to those as two different things. And also remember you're part of TRP, so you can always ask us questions about your budget and you can make sure that you have it right.
Back to
Anonymous.
that wholesaling question, I think if you build a relationship, you may have some early access to some of the deals. So
Will you share? Is that one of the questions on here, Jim?
no, I'm thinking back to the one a minute ago
Oh.
where you can't get anything because they're all going sight unseen. I know
Gotcha.
there's wholesaling companies like New Western that are like growing like crazy and they
Mhm.
keep moving their properties sight unseen. But you may be able to find like a local wholesaler instead of like a giant wholesaling company and build a relationship with them.
Huge point.
Send your buy box over to them. Let them know what you're looking for. Take them to lunch.
Fantastic, Jim. That's so huge that I think is completely misunderstood about both sides of that relationship, the wholesaler side and the flipper side. A lot of wholesalers think they need this huge buyers list,
All right.
right? That's
My buyers list when I was wholesaling, I built it up to like 3,000 people. But
right.
other than doing those bus tours, there's probably less than 5 people that got 90% of my deals
Exactly.
because I knew exactly what they wanted. And I would just call them and say, do you want this one? I didn't broadcast it at all.
And I did a very small amount of wholesaling when I started. I did 2 years of it. I enjoyed it. It was fun, but it wasn't flipping for me. That's how I grew up in it. So I transitioned to flipping, then new construction. And now as a buyer, as a person on the other end of that, I didn't really understand it back then as a wholesaler, but now as a buyer, the perspective I have on it now is if a wholesaler reaches out to me directly, I am 2 times, 3 times, 4 times more likely to buy that deal than seeing it on Facebook. When I see it on Facebook or in my email box, I'm like, now I have to reach out. Is it even still available? Who knows if it's already been bid up already? It's a great deal. So I'm already talking myself into other people already wanting the deal and then having to go to a negotiating war. I'd rather have that relationship.
Me
I'll
too.
pay you a good fee. Like
Follow up with them, guys. Just reach out and ask if they have any. What's your next deal you have coming?
yeah,
I do this with realtors and pocket listings also, Brandon, all the time. I'll follow up with them. And I've got a few realtors that I'll buy, 3, 4, 5 deals from in a year.
yeah.
You got to follow up.
I do the same thing. I think even I had this one wholesaler who moved to Florida, which is why I'm really interested in the Fort Myers market. But he was fantastic. He would bring me the deals directly. He would like promise me the next deal. I don't know if that's appropriate or if that's the best way to do it, but that's the way he would do
Reality.
it. And I'm telling you, as a person on the other end, that meant so much to me. There was trust there. There was a relationship there. I would do stuff for him when he needed something, vice versa. It was great. Thanks for all the questions, by the
I see
way,
Linda's
everybody.
question. I just want to take this one real quick because Linda and I go to church together.
Beautiful.
And if I'm down, she's going to tell me when I see her at 8 a.m. on Sunday. She's saying, can you get into the houses that wholesalers are moving? A lot of times you can. When I wholesaled, I always had them open. There are people wholesaling right now that don't tell the sellers that they're wholesaling and they don't have access. Like they skip that step. So you got to be careful what wholesaler you're working with.
Love it.
Go ahead, Brandon.
Anonymous has another one. I'd love to know your name, Anonymous, but that's all good. Will you share your flipping formula to make sure a deal is a good deal? I think we can make this pretty simple. Start with the way I do it. Now, of course, people start with different numbers and work their way down. I start with the ARV, back everything out. That's the way I am. So I start with what I think it's going to sell for. You check comps. I think everybody here should be pretty aware of how to do that. And then I back out closing costs. And it's chronological the way I back things out. It's an easier way for me to think of the formula. Closing costs, financing costs, rehab costs, holding costs. Well, I guess holding costs would be with financing, and then commission. Am I missing anything there?
No, it's good.
Yep. Pretty simple. All right. Thanks for all the questions. Annie, not sure if question will pop in as anonymous. I don't do Zoom. Nope, I got you, Annie. If you're starting out and don't even know how to swing a hammer, how do you ask the right questions and build a team without coming across as unprofessional? This is a great question. I don't want to fake it till I make it because I believe in honesty and transparency. I like that. I think there's a balance, but I like that. Any advice? And right after this, Caitlin, I'm going to answer yours now that we're on the topic of contractors. So let's start with Annie's. How do we build better relationships with contractors when we don't know what we're talking about? What do you think, Jim?
I think it's important you just ask a lot of questions, and I think this is harder as a female than a male also. But I think it's important to learn. I mean, why don't you join TRP? You're going to tell them how they can join your group, Brandon?
Yes. Yeah.
You do this question every day, so I'm going to let you give a snapshot into TRP on this one.
Sure. I try not to plug it too much, but absolutely. We actually had a person in the group. This is a great question. It's a perfect time to talk about it, actually, because we had a person in the group who he came into the Richmond market. Jim knows him. It's Mike Smith. He literally came into the market and took everybody out to coffee. So that's one tool for you to use if you're new, for anybody. That is, he literally, yeah, he was like sitting down with me at coffee. And he was like, yeah, I just sat down with Rich Lennon the day before. I want to say he was going to sit down with you. I forget for sure. But he was just meeting everybody. But he joined the group right away. And his first feedback he gave me, he's a huge supporter. I appreciate him so much. The first feedback he gave me was, my relationships with my contractors are night and day compared to what they used to be. They know that I know the schedule. They know that I know relative budgeting, the process. I know how to do this business. I don't know everything, but I know it enough to speak the language. Now, if you don't join TRP, the answer is a lot more difficult because I think it's like Jim said, you have to ask questions and you have to learn yourself. But just like we talked about a lot today, it's about your network. Was it, Jim? Your network is your net worth.
Yeah, it is.
And if you surround yourself with the right people,
network, Brandon, is so important. Like, ask other investors for some help with contractors. Ask for those referrals.
Yep. And one of the reasons I think Inner Circle is one of the best decisions I made in my business is because of stuff like this. Now I have a group of people who are collaborating and helping each other willingly. It's not like a burden to ask people in the group for advice. If you have questions, they're expecting it and they're willing and wanting to help. So I think that's great advice. It's again another theme of this whole call, but if you're looking at needing to learn a certain part of this business, it might be worth investing the time and money into learning it so you can build those relationships a little bit better and be more successful in each individual facet. You know, we can't be expected to know everything. Again, our jobs are leaders. We're in a leadership role, but as leaders, you are a master of none. I'm going to butcher this saying. You're a master of none, but you're a tradesman. You know everything for the most part. Sorry, I guess opposite of a tradesman.
You're like a Swiss Army knife.
There you go. Thank you for saving me. I was worried going down that road. I knew I was going to butcher the saying.
There you go.
Yeah, hopefully that helps.
I mean, Linda, I still learn, don't you, Brandon?
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Right?
Part of the reason for starting the group was so they could teach me. I say it all the time. I'm like, I'm learning from you guys as well. I'm just organizing the information and giving it out so that we're all learning together.
Love that approach.
It's very, very complicated, this business. There's no reason for you to try to do it yourself. It's all collaboration.
But if you're brand new and you get onto a job site, ask a million questions.
And come at it with kind of the
Again,
attitude that me and Jim are talking about too, collaboration. Let them
building-
prove to you that they're not willing to collaborate. Protect yourself. And if that's the case, fire faster, hire a new one. Judy, so helpful. We offered 20K less, making purchase price. Gotcha. Cool. Judy, awesome. Greg's here. We showed off your gift to me earlier. I don't know if you saw that.
Love it,
Would you
Greg.
buy a foreclosure that is still occupied? It's a good question.
Probably not.
Yeah. Yeah, I stay away from those. I'm very nervous to do something like that. All right, let me clear these out. Trevor, normally that means it wasn't a good deal. Trevor's my boy. Glad to have you on, Trevor. Linda, thought I'd share this quote. It's for me, but might apply to someone else here too. LOL. Oh, Linda, I don't think we see the quote.
I think it's coming in a minute, maybe.
Oops. Here's the quote. You have to take action. Knowledge is only as good as you apply it. Yeah.
That's true.
And I tell people, I hear people who get caught in paralysis analysis too much. This is my advice. It doesn't hit with everybody, but I look at action as a habit just as much as anything. So if you're any part of your life that you have analysis paralysis, it might be going to the gym, it might be doing house chores, it might be making that phone call to it could be non-business relationship, or it could be non-business related. But the idea is just constantly taking action. And then you get to a point where you're like me, where you're just taking too much action and somebody needs to reel you back. So it's just kind of that. Linda, that's a great quote. I advise everybody here to get into the habit of taking action.
I agree.
Brandon, are you going to share?
Some momentum.
Yep. All right, let's get back to a couple more things, Jim. Then I'll let you go because I know your time is valuable. I appreciate your time so much. We talked about this in Inner Circle. So now it's time for me to ask you the question. Creating the right product. I find it immensely important. And going back to what we talked about in the beginning, how do flippers fail? I think this is one of them. Okay. Talk to us about building the right product. How do you know what the right product is? And what are some of the problems that can come from not building the right product when it comes to
I think when you're starting, sometimes it's easy to over renovate because you think you're in the HGTV business when you're in the house flipping business. You don't have to make a perfect house. You got to make a profit. Okay.
Yes.
So that's a balance that we go back and forth with all the time as well. So you gotta watch that because you want things to be really nice, but you also got to make sure you protect your profit at the same time. I think it's important to know like what those comps have in them for finishes. Do they have a quartz countertop? Do they have a ceramic backsplash? Do the bathtubs have ceramic back, surrounds? Do you have wood floors? Do you have carpet?
Yeah.
No, what is it? What do those comps have? And that's true whether you're renting or selling. Yes. So start with what product you're trying to achieve.
That's exactly. I just point them straight to the comps. If you really focus on that and study that, you should be able to get all your answers there. It's the problem when people don't even refer to them. And when they say, I want to build a house 10 times better than that other house, that doesn't make any sense. Yeah, you're going to spend too much, diminish your ROI, and have some problems. We're in the business to make money, right? If you want to be in the business of creating great houses, well, that's awesome. You might not make money, but that's cool, but what we're talking about today is the business of flipping houses. And if you want to build a business around this, you can't afford that. You have to be profitable. You have to be making the right decisions. And I was just pointing them straight to the comps.
Is people that I've known over the years that are sort of like slumlords who just buy a house, don't do anything to it, and just rent it out.
Yep. Lipstick on the pig.
Maybe not even that. I've had people that, like, I had a friend who lived in Indianapolis. He told me, Brandon, he's in the crap flow business. And he was. It's not a product I would want to be associated with, right?
Yep.
So
I'm the same way.
Both ends. You could have VCT stick-on tiles and a old laminate countertop or ceramic countertop if you want, and old beat up appliances, but that isn't going to work either.
Yep. And when you think about it, there's really only two directions you could go. You could over renovate or you can under renovate. Just pay attention to what that means compared to other houses in your market. What would over renovating look like? Well, every other house has granite countertops. They don't even need a backsplash with just like Lowe's cabinets. Well, then in my house, I don't need quartz countertops with a marble backsplash and high-end custom cabinets, right? I can do something a lot like that. So pay attention to what you are actually trying to compete against, because we're in the business of creating products as house flippers, just as much as many other businesses that create products and compete against other products, right? You have to pay attention to what else is out there. How do you compete with that to make sure that you're making money compared to the amount of cash you have invested? All right. That is incredibly important. I think that should never, ever be overlooked. Again, that probably is what frustrates me most when I see other flippers. I got to be honest, when I see other flippers either over renovate or under renovate, that's what frustrates me the most, for no reason, but it is. Last topic, Jim, and then Caitlin. I am so sorry. I sure hope you're still on here, Caitlin, because I forgot to get to your question again. Let's see. Maybe she left us. Maybe we're the reason she left us.
Could be.
Yeah. I'll reach out to her. She's part of our group.
Awesome.
Huge. Last thing, Jim, and then I'm going to let you go.
All right.
Managing cash flow. Flipping, when it comes to cash flow, it is a nightmare. A lot of businesses that go out, a lot of businesses that fail strictly because of this reason. You could even be profitable on all of your flips, but be taking on too many flips where it has so much stress on your cash flow that you're unloading properties and not being able to make interest payments, right? There's a part of it that you have to completely understand of when the money's going out and coming in and how much we have to be able to handle that. Can you speak to that at all? What do you think?
Yeah, it's also how, I mean, it's also an easy way for somebody to end up in a Ponzi scheme.
Yep.
Because what happens is you start to over leverage consistently, and all of a sudden you think you've got to buy a house so that you can get your funding up front, not for the house you're trying to buy, but so you can finish the last one. Oh my gosh, Brandon, I can't believe you're even bringing this point up because nobody ever talks about it, but it is critical. Absolutely critical. And if somebody's struggling with this right now, then really just really look at your books or get some help from somebody like David Richter, who does Profit First.
It's a good plug.
Get some help in this area so that you don't end up in a Ponzi scheme inadvertently. I know there's corrupt people, but there's also people that end up there by accident because they don't know what to do when they over leverage.
It's a good point. Yeah, I've seen people.
Say you're going to flip 10 houses in a year, and you're going to spend $500,000 doing that. If every one of those goes over budget by 10 or 15%, that's easy to do. All of a sudden, you're 75,000 short. So you better have a line of credit or something else to help bail you out. Or you could still be profitable exactly like you said and still be struggling. And that is highly frustrating.
It's almost even a lesson to lenders, you know, because we've seen this so much where I would say that if a lender was to vet it properly, maybe they would understand that they're over leveraged. But at the same time, it's really easy for somebody to say, hey, look, I've flipped 25 houses. I've flipped 50 houses. Look at all this, right? When I go up to new lenders, I got to be honest, they just look at my portfolio and they think I've been profitable. I could have lost money on all of them. Luckily, I'm being honest, we've made good money on them, but that's kind of what you see. And what happens is maybe the past 10 houses of them has been a rob Peter to pay Paul over and over and over, where it turns into a vicious cycle and they don't have any cash. And yeah, I've heard conversations of people who ended up in really big problems where they say, we need to go buy another house so we can pay for the loss that we just had on the last house. If you ever end up in that situation, give us a call. We're going to talk you completely out of it. Don't buy that other house. There's other ways to work your way out of this than continuing to do the thing that kind of got you there in the first place.
It compounds really fast.
Really fast.
So be really careful.
Yep. And when you're looking at this
Great
business,
tip.
and when we're kind of wrapping up this topic about the real business of flipping houses, I think that's a great topic to kind of end on, because that is the real business. That is really where the rubber hits the road and where it turns into an issue for a lot of people. Manage your cash flow. And it goes back to what we were talking about financing. And Jim, you had a great explanation of what the financing terms are. You need to understand how much money is going out in closing. Okay, great. How much money is going out monthly? Okay, great. I have all that money. Now, how much money do I have to put in the rehab before I get my first draw, right? That's not a very easy money in, money out type management of cash flow. That's depends on timing. That depends on construction schedules, closing timelines. There's a lot of stuff that can't be set in stone, that you're just constantly moving around.
All very good points.
Yeah. All right, Jim. Hey, look, I appreciate you so much. We took a lot of your time. I owe you. We're going to be down in Deltaville together, hopefully, I hope. But at some point, I'm sure I'll be seeing you soon.
All right, I hope so. I look forward to doing that, and very grateful for you. I love what you're doing with TRP. I'm cheering for you every day, Brandon.
I'm cheering for you, Jim. I appreciate you. I wanted to take a moment to publicly give my admiration, my thanks to you. You've done so much. I won't go too far, Jim. Don't worry. You're very, very humble, but you probably don't know how much you were a role in me starting the Playbook. Between Dealmaker and Inner Circle, how much that affected my life was the reason I wanted to build something that could potentially affect other people.
Well, think of all the people you're helping with this, because there was a huge void in this area. So I'm so thrilled that you're doing it.
It's been incredibly rewarding. Yeah, incredibly rewarding, emotionally, mentally, for business, of course, but for just me as a person, it's been very rewarding. So I advise anybody who has a great, I didn't bring a lot to the table. I was just really good at rehabbing and flipping and building. But if you have any sort of expertise, anything that you can consider something you're super interested in, this is my advice to you. I think Jim would have the same. Start a group, start education, start training. I think it's very important. Shoot, reach out to me. Maybe I'll join, right? Because we're all trying to get better, smarter, and more efficient. So anyway, that's it. Thanks everybody who's been on the call. And Jim, another thanks to you. I really appreciate you.
You too.
Take care. Enjoy Deltaville.
Happy rehabbing, everybody. See you guys later.
Happy rehabbing. Take care.